There's a reason that we live so far from Hollywood, in the country looking hard to find a home, with nothing perfect or considered, but we're so damn good. It's the story of your life.
Morning, glory, America, bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. There is no war yet in Ukraine, so it's a good morning. I hope you are feeling great on this Wednesday, February the 9th, in the year of our Lord, 2022. I am live from the West Coast today, and of course, the most important bit of news this morning concerns the fact that Nate Silver, legendary statistician with 538, projects that the Cleveland Cavaliers have an 87% chance of making the playoffs and a 0.1% chance of winning it all, which is better than any chance they've had since LeBron James left, so I'm a happy man this morning. Good morning. We got a lot of guests today. Dana Perino's coming along. Future Congresswoman Morgan Ortagus will be here. Current Congresswoman Representative Elvira Salazar is here. Wesbury's coming along, and then Captain Edward Bartlett on the subject of submarines in Ohio. Let's run down the news. Washington Post. Russia sends warships towards Black Sea as Europe ramps up Ukraine crisis diplomacy. Look, there isn't much diplomacy. People go and they beg Putin not to invade, and he decides whether or not. It all depends upon the amount of force and weapons we get to Ukraine and the sanctions like blowing up Nord Stream 2 that are coming. New York Times. Europe calls for peace, but not at any price. This is a long story on saying nothing. It should just have a capital. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I'm holding it up. Should just be Europeans, appeasement or war. That's what it is right now. Ukraine under pressure to bow to Russia demands after meeting with Emmanuel Macron, according to the Telegraph. The French president signaled the West would back Russian demands for Ukraine to change its constitution to avert an invasion. You're going to hear today, if you listen to the news at all, about the Minsk Accord. That was when a whole bunch of countries, including Ukraine, Russia, the U.S., and I think Germany and France, got together after the last Russian war against Ukraine in 2014 when President Obama was the appeasement president in the White House. And they said, what do you want Russia to stop? And they said, we want these 25 things. So they wrote down a bunch of vague things that no one knows what it means. They're called the Minsk Accords. And Putin keeps telling Macron, the only way forward is the Minsk Accords. We don't really know what that means. It has whatever Putin wants it to mean. Putin is a thug. Putin is an authoritarian thug, not quite totalitarian. There's some spheres of quasi-freedom in Russia. But he does kill journalists. He assassinates people using radiological weapons in the United Kingdom. He invaded Syria. He's invaded Crimea. He's just a thug. Dick Cheney was right. Dick Cheney was right. Dick Cheney was right. When I look into his eyes, I see a former KGB colonel. So that's it. Ruthless, cold-blooded predator. So what does he want? He wants as much of the Ukraine as he can get without having the cost-benefit analysis go sideways. The only way to keep him out, is to raise the cost. They're not very good at that at the Biden White House. Tony Blinken is really bad at it. And the backdrop, which was in the Post yesterday, documents reveal U.S. military's frustration with White House and diplomats over Afghanistan investigation. The Post has received 2,000 pages from the Freedom of Information Act about the desperate attempt to get Americans and soldiers and allies out of Afghanistan and why it was so screwed up. The answer, Joe Biden. Second answer, Tony Blinken. That's why. Mitch McConnell. I haven't looked at my cut sheet yet. I didn't get up early enough to help Dwayne with this morning. Here's Mitch McConnell, cut number 17.
Well, let me give you my view of what happened January the 6th. And we're here. We saw what happened. It was a violent insurrection for the purpose of trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power after a legitimately certified election from one administration to the next. That's what it was. With regard to the suggestion that the RNC should be in the business of picking and choosing Republicans who ought to be supported, traditionally the view of the national party committees is that we support all members of our party regardless of their positions on some issues.
Do you have confidence in her, Ronna McDaniel, as chairwoman of the committee?
I do, but the issue is whether or not the RNC should be sort of singling out members of our party who may have different views from the majority. That's not the job of the RNC.
Okay, so I want people to understand that when Manu shouted out, do you have confidence in her? He's looking for a headline. Here's the situation in the Republican Party. There are three camps. The Never Trumpers, very small group of people. They mostly work for MSNBC. I no longer do because I'm not a Never Trumper. The Always Trumpers, and they turn up at various places around the United States, and it doesn't matter if the former president says A on Monday and not A on Tuesday. They'll believe A on Monday and not A on Tuesday. Right? That's the Always Trumpers. And in between are the rest of the Republicans. We just want to rebuild the military and put people on the Supreme Court and name judges and pass and stop bad legislation, pass good legislation. And the RNC came in, and in deference to Group B, the Always Trumpers, they passed a resolution that ignored what Group C really believes, which is there was a riot, the vice president could have been killed, the speaker could have been killed, members of Congress could have been killed, and there are 725 people who have been arrested. They all should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and those who are charged with violent crimes should serve every day that they're sentenced to. No going easy. Then the rest of us in Group B say, but those people down at the other end of the mall who either did not walk up to the Congress or who did not go into the Congress, they were exercising a right that, I was in Washington for the inauguration in 2017. And do you remember the violence that day on 2017 when Trump was inaugurated? I was anchoring in my NBC days the inauguration. And we cut between the inauguration and the riot. And there was a riot downtown. Didn't threaten the Capitol, but there was a riot downtown. There was also, the next day, a couple of 100,000 women in the pink hats. 5 of them stayed at my house. Good friends of mine. I get along with everybody. I'm a Christian. That's my job. And the pink hats were, exercising their constitutional rights. Most of the people who went to the rally at Donald Trump's end of the mall when the president left were the equivalent of the pink hats. The few hundred that went up to the Congress were really, really the hardcore pink hats. And then the 725 are criminal, those who have been charged. Mitch is saying those 725 were involved in an insurrection, an attempt to stop the counting. I'm not sure it's an insurrection, but that's the word they use. It wasn't a coup. It was definitely a riot, and it was definitely murder in their hearts. But that's what is going on with Mitch. Back to the rundown. The House passed another short-term spending bill. Why? Because Nancy Pelosi can't run the House, and one of the Democrats of the 50 are in a hospital in New Mexico, and no one will tell us how he's doing. My favorite story, and believe me, in fact, I'm going to do my Birch Gold pitch here. Birch Gold is a sponsor of this show. Go to hughgold.com. Gold this morning is at $1,828 an ounce. That's up. The 10-year Treasury at 1.954%. It's going to cross 2, I think, tomorrow or the next day. The Dow was up 371 yesterday. The S&P up 37. The NASDAQ up 178. My favorite stock, one of the only two I own. Amazon gained 2% yesterday to 32228. That's more, one digit more than it's got. 3228. So I never ever report on Bitcoin. Why not? I'm not telling you to roll over. You probably could. Please don't do this. You could probably roll over a portion of your retirement into a Bitcoin account. But what Birch Gold does is it rolls over some of your retirement, your IRA, your SEP IRA, your 401k, into a physical depository of physical gold based upon the ounce price of the day that you buy. So you have to text my name, Hugh, to 989898 to find out what that gets you. How much gold? What's it going to cost you a year? They'll send you a free information kit. Lots of people do it. Do not do that, which you can with real estate, through some vehicles. You can do it. You could buy Bitcoin for your IRA if you wanted to. Dumb. Yesterday, the United States arrested 2 people who had stolen $3.6 billion in cryptocurrency in a Bitfinex hack. Crypto is what I'm really railing against. $3.6 billion, a couple of tech wizards got in there and got $3.6 billion of Bitcoin and other crypto. And it took them, I don't know, how long did it take them? Took them a long time. It was 2016 that they stole it. So 5 years later, they got it back. If you buy Bitcoin, you don't even know where it is. Oh, it's in my crypto wallet? Sure it is. You betcha it is. If you're a dummy like me about crypto, don't buy it. Buy Amazon. It's the dumbest and easiest thing in the world to do. Or buy one of the FANG stocks that isn't compromised by China. Don't buy, or go buy Procter & Gamble. That's a widows and orphans stock. Don't buy Bitcoin. I'm Hugh Hewitt. This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with two senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet with 3 years to go is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
What the Supreme Court has said is you have to have a compelling state interest, and the compelling state interest that the Supreme Court found was the benefits that flow from having a diverse student body, whatever those benefits may be. But you have to have a diverse student body to get these certain benefits, okay? So that justifies this kind of racial alchemy in terms of admissions. Here's the problem. Increasingly at schools, you have, regardless of how supposedly integrated they are, you're getting more and more racial separatism, separate classes, separate dormitories, separate graduations. There's more and more of that going on, and one of the basic reasons for that is because of mismatch, because of the serious mismatch in academic qualifications between Asians, Latinos, blacks, and whites.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You want to know what's even crazier and funnier in a sick way? There's a security guard right there. The shoplifter, the looter, walks right by the security guard who isn't doing anything. He's got a jacket on with the big security on the back of his coat, and he stands there and watches the guy. The guy literally brushes right by the security guard. The security guard, what are they paying the security guard for? Just to stand there? Why don't we just put mannequins up in stores in New York? I may never go back. I swear, I may never go back. New York is turning into a hellhole, and Democrats are watching it. They're letting it happen. I can't wait to get Joe Borelli's take on all of this insanity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it, I can't. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Get up and get gory. New day dawning, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live from the West Coast this morning. You may have noticed, I always begin the show, the first bump, with this, and I end it often with a hymn, just so that you realize you just can't pack it away for the day after you've said your morning prayers or meditation, or you just can't pack it away for the day. If you're in the car, it's better for me to remind you to be that way, whatever way that is, that you want to be at work. Now, I try and be charitable towards teachers' unions. I really do. I really love teachers. Our small group has a couple of lifelong teachers in it, Tim and Kate, and both their kids are teachers. And we just had our once-a-year small group a couple of weeks ago, and I asked them how things were going and got a description. They've been teaching junior high for you. If your kids had Tim and Kate, you know who I'm talking about, and you're blessed. And their children will be great teachers. And even Generalissimo found a teacher who would marry him. And I'm telling you, that just goes to tell you what teachers are. They're endlessly patient. She still is married to you, isn't she, Generalissimo? Is Dwayne?
Yes.
She's still married to you, right?
She was as of this morning when I
left.
left.
Just checking, because I was complimenting teachers that I know. And I know lots and lots of wonderful teachers, because I'm about to rip teachers' unions.
As you should.
As I should, as I want to distinguish between teachers and teachers' unions.
Which everybody should do, and that's part of the messaging. A lot of people want to attack teachers. It's not them, it's the unions.
It's the unions. And the unions run the boards because they get them elected by big money contributions, which until 2 years ago could be forcefully extracted from their wallet by virtue of bad law that the Supreme Court has repealed. And they run school boards, and the school boards run school district superintendents, and the superintendents are afraid of the union and the school boards. And that's why we have masking. There is no science behind masking children in school. There is science behind concluding that it is deeply injurious to many of them, and at best an inconvenience to some and a show. So all of the blue states are falling. They're falling all over the place. New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware. Gone. Masks away, masks away. Yesterday in Virginia, a bill passed the state Senate, which will be on Glenn Youngkin's desk, hopefully within a week, to ban them in Virginia, despite the biggest school district unions inside the Beltway saying mask, mask, mask. Headline from NJ.com, that would stand for New Jersey for the Steelers fans. Largest school district will require face masks after the state mandate ends. Why is that? That's because teachers like them. That's because teachers realize that they're giving up power and control, and that they're the end of the pandemic. When the masks come off, all of the remote learning, all the double classroom rules, all the screens, all the crap that have gone in for the last 2 years that did nothing to protect your children. Nothing. Because your children have never been at risk. I think there have been 45,000 child deaths, each one of them a heartbreaking tragedy since the beginning of the virus. And less than 400 of them have attributed to the virus. And there's risk everywhere. New York City made no decision on scrapping the school mask mandate. Now, there is a story out in Nature magazine this week. You have to go to nature.com. Does Omicron hit kids harder? Turns out more kids got sick with Omicron, and they were less sick than they were under Delta. That's the preliminary from Nature. Michael Barone, the remarkable Michael Barone, has an article in the Washington Examiner, returning to normalcy on school masks. And he talks about, as only Michael Barone does, the word normalcy entered American politics in the 1920 campaign for the president, run by Warren G. Harding. After World War I, after Woodrow Wilson, he said, let's just go back to being Buckeyes. He's from Ohio. He was a normal guy. And the whole deal was he played poker. He was pretty corrupt. But, I mean, by today's standards, nah. And he just wanted to go back to normal. Americans want to go back to normal. We want to go back to normal. If your school district has not yet ordered the masks off, go to the next meeting and speak in the 3 minutes before it begins, civilly, remembering that you've never met an ordinary human being. Each is either an everlasting horror and immortal splendor. That's from C.S. Lewis, vaguely paraphrased. You've never met an ordinary human being, and even the people on the school board and the school district deserve your respect. But demand, quietly, firmly, continually, get rid of the masks. They're hurting children. You know it. I know it. Stop listening to the teachers union, and then vote them all out in November.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
It seems like the Democrats tried their best to try to eliminate the filibuster, and it failed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thankfully, it did fail. Republicans stood united against that, as we have been from the very beginning, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin also stood with us in preserving the rules and the customs of the Senate. These rules and customs go back more than 200 years, Charlie. They are directly downstream from where our founders created a Senate in the first place, to provide the sober second thought against radical sweeping change to our country. It's pretty amazing that 48 out of 50 Democrats were willing to blow up the filibuster. They were willing to break the rules to change the rules. And Charlie, that would have just been the first step towards redistributing political power in this country. The Democrats' next stop probably would have been to make Washington, D.C. a state, our federal city that is by far the most liberal jurisdiction in America. So the Democrats could get 2 more Democratic senators in perpetuity. The next stop would have been to pack our federal courts, to include the Supreme Court, to stop the courts from overturning any of these unconstitutional actions. This entire effort, Charlie, was not about just altering this or that public policy. It was about forever changing the structure of political power in our country. You sometimes heard the argument that, well, the Democrats shouldn't do this because the shoe was on the other foot. Their entire goal was to make sure, Charlie, that the shoe would never be on the other foot. So it was a critical day in the history of our country and the history of the Senate as an institution. And I'm glad we stopped these radicals. That's why we have to turn them out of power in November.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
This really is a Leninist strategy. Lenin's old saying that the capitalists will sell us the rope by which we will hang them is what China's doing. The Soviets couldn't do it for a couple reasons. Number one, they didn't have the money. They didn't have a whole lot of rubles to throw around, and people in the West didn't want them. But number two, there was a lot bigger sense of social cohesion during the Cold War. The notion, if you're a corporate executive during the Cold War, that you would be playing footsies with the Kremlin was outrageous. And yet in the case of China, the human rights situation, the challenge to American national security is every bit as great. I would argue perhaps even greater than it was in the Cold War era. But Wall Street, Silicon Valley, they are all happy to not only do deals with them, but do deals with them that benefit the Chinese military and intelligence state, and they don't seem to particularly care that they do.
Well, there was stigma in helping the Soviets. There's no stigma in helping the Chinese communists.
That's right. And I think that, part of that is there's been this naivete for decades that if we just gave China money, if we gave them access to our technology, they were going to buy our blue jeans, they were going to watch some of our movies, they would become just like us. What's really happened, when you look at issues like censorship by big tech in the United States, when you look at some of the other things that are going on, it's not that China's become more like us. We've actually become more like China. And that experiment has to fade away. And the problem is not only were our elites wrong in their prescription of that policy, but that policy made them rich. And they do not want to now give up those relationships with Beijing because it means the money's going to stop flowing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
All right, America, I'm Hugh Hewitt. This is the Steelers segment. For people who are a little bit slow, but they're determined to learn. And they stay at it. I love my Pittsburgh fans. I'm on live right now, and I know they're addicted to me, and they love me, and I'm addicted to them, and so this is for them. The position of party leader in the United States Senate has been in a number of hands since I was born in 1956. It is now the position held by Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell saved the Constitution when, despite a ferocious assault from the left, he quite courageously refused to hold hearings for any nominee, no matter who they were, during the election year, saying the American people should vote before we fill the vacancy on the Supreme Court created by the untimely death of the giant Antonin Scalia. And that decision not only saved the Supreme Court, it got President Trump elected. Because if the court had not been at the center of many swing voters' concerns, President Trump would not have won in 2016. So President Trump owes Leader McConnell his election. Now, President Trump likes to say that he helped Leader McConnell, and he did help, but you couldn't beat Leader McConnell in Kentucky with McClellan. You couldn't beat him with Grant. You can't get him out of Kentucky. You couldn't beat him with Lee. You couldn't beat him with anyone. He is Kentucky, and he's going to be the senator from Kentucky as long as he wants to be the senator of Kentucky, and the good Lord gives him the ability. But nevertheless, I want to make a point to you. I want to make a point, and this is actually going to be the monologue. I'm not going to do this over and over again. I was born in 1956. I am 65. I began to be aware of politics in about 1965, 66, sometime around 9 or 10. Read Time magazine every week. Remember Lyndon Johnson on the TV. Everyone's got a first president. With Dwayne, it's FDR. But with me, it's actually LBJ. But I go back and I look. Who was the Republican leader when I was born? A guy named William Nolan. He's a Californian. He and Nixon sort of got along, didn't get along. I don't remember William Nolan. He was replaced by Everett Dirksen. I have the vaguest memory of the Illinois gravelly-voiced. Illinois used to have Republicans. It's hard to believe. Charles Percy, Everett Dirksen, they used to have Republicans. I kind of remember Everett Dirksen, not a great leader. All right, not a great leader. He wasn't a bad leader. He wasn't a great leader. Why? Because Republicans have never, ever actually played hardball until Cocaine Mitch came along. And after Everett Dirksen, we go to Hugh Scott. Now, Hugh Scott is a great name. Let's be clear. If you're going to be named Mitchell or Hugh, you want to be named Hugh. But we actually have a grandchild on the way, and they've been debating names, and I have vetoed Hugh. I've lived with Hugh, and I've vetoed Hugh. Want no Hughes. But Hugh Scott did all way, Pennsylvania. Howard Baker got to be the leader for a while, and Howard Baker, great man, did his job in Watergate, kind of, meh, when it came to leading the Senate. Ted Stevens got to act, and for about a couple of weeks, no one knew what the hell was going on. Ted Stevens was the November 1, 1979 to March 5, 1980. And then Howard Baker came back. I don't know what was going on. Maybe Howard Baker, I thought he went to the Reagan White House during then. Is that when he went to the Reagan White House? I don't know. That's not right. I don't know why he stepped down in 1970. Maybe he was sick for a while, but Howard Baker came back. Then comes Bob Dole. Now, Bob Dole remains a great American figure as we recognize by his lying in state in the rotunda. Everybody liked Bob Dole. Very smart, genuine article, real deal war hero. Not much of a campaigner for president. 1996 campaign, maybe the worst campaign we've ever run because we thought we could win and we didn't win. Bob Dole standing alone in the field. Where's the outrage? Where's the outrage? Not the second. He's the silver medalist in Republican leaders. Then we come to Trent Lott. There's a lot to say about Trent Lott, and I'm not going to say it. He is a great lobbyist now. He was a great lobbyist then. He was from Mississippi. Mississippi's a great state. Trent Lott lives in D.C. now. I would love to sit down and have a cigar with Trent Lott, though I don't smoke cigars anymore, because the guy, he showed up at W's ranch back when W was going through the transition, and Dick Cheney met him on the porch, and it was he and I can't remember, it wasn't Boehner, Denny Hastert. And I thought to myself, this is not going to work. I have a friend who never liked Trent Lott, pointed out he was a cheerleader at Mississippi, University of Mississippi. I got nothing against the University of Mississippi. I've got nothing against a cheerleader. Dwayne was a cheerleader in college. And we have no cheerleader angst here. We like the enthusiasm, go for it. But Trent Lott could not cheerlead the Senate. You need to lead the Senate. And it wasn't let. Bill Frist, good guy, running for president the day he got in there. Running for president against John McCain, and he would lose. He's a good politician, great Tennessee, fine doctor, great humanitarian. And then in 2007, Mitch McConnell became the leader of the Republicans. 2007. Now, for the Pittsburgh Steelers fans, think about that. That's 15 years of running that, what do we call that, asylum? The Senate Republican Conference. The Democratic Conference is worse, I know that, but for 15 years, Mitch McConnell has been the leader of the Senate as effectively as anyone I've named, because it's an institutional job and you really don't care about anything except your members and getting things over the line or stopping things from getting over the line. You don't actually care who the president is. That if it's a Democrat, you have to stop things from getting over the line or make them the least worst version of them. And if you're the majority leader, you have to get what it is possible to get over the line. And you need 60 votes in almost every occasion to get something over the line. And the Republicans have never had 60 votes in my lifetime. So every piece of legislation that you like has had a leader behind it, one of the men I named, who's gotten it over the line. And the most legislation that I like, and the most judges that I love, and the 3 justices who have made my career worthwhile. For 30 years, I've been doing this on the radio to get the Supreme Court back to an originalist. I got asked this on Sunday. Have you achieved your life goal? I'm 65. Well, no, Dwayne and I are still here, so we're not done yet. My life goal is to be the best radio show on radio for as long as we are, and we are. And you can call me if you disagree, 1-800-520-1234. I'm a newsman to be a good writer. Mostly it's to get to heaven, get my spouse to heaven, get my kids to heaven. Those are goals 1, 2, and 3. And their spouses and my grandchildren, 4 and 5. Be a Christian to everyone I meet. Protect the country, love the country, because this is the place where freedom happens. And do well professionally. That's like at number 5 or 6. Do well professionally. Be as good as you can be professionally. And I've had a number of different jobs. Been a lawyer and a teacher and a law professor and a writer and a speaker and a broadcaster. And Mitch has had one job. He's been a senator. I think he was born a senator and he was just had to be eligible at some point. And the leader is the best leader we have. And I know you go on the radio sometime and you hear people railing about Mitch McConnell. They do not understand the United States Senate. They don't. They don't understand what you do or how you do it or how you get things done. They don't understand that we have a 6-3 conservative majority for the first time since Earl Warren. First time in my life, we're going to get decisions that make sense. It's a long game at the Supreme Court. It's a longer game than the Senate. So we don't know what the chief is up to. We don't know what justices are going to do or be, but we know that we got a shot for the first time ever of having a conservative court, and that's all Leader McConnell. So Leader McConnell is neither the enemy nor the friend of Donald Trump. He represents Republicans in the United States Senate, and they represent states, and there are 50 of them. So he's got 50 different Republican senators to take care of their needs, their wants, their goals in a conference that must act with unanimity to stop anything, and even then they can't stop everything. Now, right now they're running the Senate because Senator Lujan, God bless him and speed his recovery, is out of action for 6 to 8 weeks. I don't know. No one's ever come back from stroke that I know who's been in hospital for 2 weeks in another 4. I've just never known that happen. I've known people who've had strokes who've been back the next week. Bud the contractor did exactly the wrong thing when he had a stroke. And Bud's not up. Bud won't be up for 7 or 8 hours. Bud was at a Presbyterian church session meeting when he lost his peripheral vision in both eyes. Completely. Couldn't see anyone to his left or his right. He could only see my friend Dr. David, his friend Dr. David, across the street, the desk from him. If you've ever been to a Presbyterian session, I served on session with Bud twice. Boy, that was a burden. I'm going to heaven right away because of that. But I'm Catholic, so there's that purgatory thing. But I think I get through because the Archbishop prays for me, Archbishop Chaput, and Bud. I put up with him. And I'm going to just remind Peter, I did Bud on session twice. And if I was wrong, I bet wrong, and it's the Protestant view. I got the fetching Mrs. Hewitt on my side, and I've been on the session. So I get right in. I think that's the theory that I'm operating under, and I think I learned that in 12 years of Catholic education. So anyway, Bud's sitting in this. This is a lesson. This is Hugh Hewitt does medicine. And he loses his peripheral vision. Blink's gone. Can't see anything. Tunnel vision. He's got a great internal medicine doctor sitting across from him. He says nothing. Nothing. Goes on for 2 hours. He says, I'll go home and sleep and see what happens. He goes to bed. The next morning, he has no peripheral vision. He says to his wonderful spouse, we got to go to the ER. So they have wasted, 10 hours. Bud sleeps about 8. Probably took another 2 hours of the session to wrap up, so maybe 10 hours. Driving home was a challenge, and he had a stroke. And they ran the diagnostics, and he'd had a stroke on whatever it is in the brain that lets you see out of your peripheral vision. 100% loss of peripheral vision. Too late to use the stroke buster drug, which is why you got to get there as soon as possible. You got to take the stroke buster drug. And too late, wouldn't do any good. And then his sight comes back in 2 weeks, 100%. Doctors have never seen anything like it. Now, Bud is a man of faith and announces proudly to everyone that's one of his 2 miracles. And the other one you don't need to hear about. My miracle is I got through life with Bud. And that the fetching Mrs. Hewitt said yes. So I've got 2 miracles too. And that Dwayne is, I guess I have 3 miracles. Dwayne comes in occasionally. But my point is when you have a stroke, you don't come back fast. So Leader McConnell is actually running the Senate now diplomatically. He's got the 50 votes. Chuck's got the 49. And they're all friends and they're all professionals. So they're not raising a ruckus about Senator Lujan not being there. Because they really do wish it's a very wonderful institution. If you know any senators or have ever met any, they like each other. Even Bernie Sanders and I don't know, Ted Cruz get along, I think. I don't know. I've been to the Senate dining room a couple of times. They sure seem chummy. And that's fine. That's America. At least it used to be. But Leader McConnell is the best leader we've ever had. Don't forget it. If you hear people talking trash about him today on the air, they do not know what they're talking about. Or they understand that there's an advantage in playing to the Never Trump crowd because the president says bad things about Mitch. But David Drucker just wrote a great profile, which I retweeted on Mitch. Go read it. Go read it. Go read it. Coming right back. Time for my relief factor. Only 3 miles yesterday, and I'll tell you why. I went out the door with long pants on. I thought it was cold. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt left me alone yesterday for 6 days to go tend to grandchildren. And so I'm feral. I have cookies and pizza and Relief Factor, so I'm good for 6 days. But I'm not good on, what should I wear to go running or trundling? I thought it was cold, so I put on long pants. I was just going to walk fast. And I got my Relief Factor out because I take it in the first hour every day, and I took it. It was 80 freaking degrees out there. I only went 3 miles. Today I will check before I leave the house. I had on a sweater and long pants. It's like those old football coaches who used to think it was a good idea to take salt pills and not give water to their players when they were in high school. Boy, that was Super Bowl is going to be 88 degrees. They all better get their Relief Factor. Stay tuned.
The most powerful streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Y lo siento mucho.
Come to Christ. When the Spirit of God calls you to the cross, don't you hesitate.
You ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, Padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I would get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Let's run down the Joe Biden clip from yesterday. Remember, we've just bought $1.2 billion of Chinese-made face masks. Cut number 2.
I made it clear from day one, when the federal government spends taxpayers' dollars, we're going to buy American.
Well, no, you may have made that clear, but you didn't live up to it, Mr. President. Say a prayer for the president as well. Kamala Harris, the vice president, was heard yesterday. Word salading away, cut number 3.
So thank you all for what you have done and will continue to do. Let's keep getting the word out and be well and take care. Thank you.
Vice President Harris, how will the administration pass the child tax credit when Manchin says BBB is done?
She's leaving.
Updates on this?
She's leaving. It's a Kamala Harris sighting, and we always put those up there because we know she's still there. Ron DeSantis, by contrast, on Fox News, addressing Liz Cheney in the censure vote, cut number 1.
Liz Cheney is just totally off the rails with her nonsense. And I think she's not really a Republican in terms of what she's doing. We want people that are going to fight the left. And that's what we need to do in this country. That's what we're doing in Florida, standing up for people's freedoms. We're opposing wokeness. We're opposing all these things. To act like the main issue in this country is things that happened over a year ago, I can tell you in Florida, that's not what Floridians are concerned about. They're concerned about inflation and gas prices. They're thankful that Florida is a free state, but they look around the country and see how fragile freedom is. They're thankful we're a law and order state, but they look around and see what's happening in a lot of these cities where crimes is spiking. So I think focusing on the issues and showing that we stand for things that matter to people is the way forward. To have a vendetta against Donald Trump and to constantly be bringing this up is just not something that I think Republican voters.
No, I'll tell you, I don't think Liz Cheney has a vendetta against Donald Trump. I think she has a vendetta against always Trumpers, and especially against the 725 people who went into the Congress. And I've known Liz a long time, and the Congresswoman is smart, and she is brave, and she is courageous. I think she is wrong to have joined the 9/11 illegitimate committee. Not 9/11, 6/1, 16. I never talk about that committee. I often talk about January 6th, but I never talk about the 1/6 committee because it's not legitimate, and Liz is mad at me about that. I don't know Adam Kinzinger, by the way, from Adam. If he bumped into me, I wouldn't know who he is. But Liz Cheney did yeoman's work in the Bush administration. She's been a great leader. I was very excited when she ran the conference, and I'm sorry that she believes what she believes about the existential nature of a riot in the Capitol. It was not an existential threat to the United States. It was not a coup attempt. It had no organized support. It would have been if the vice president had done the wrong thing and had put the side of votes, they would have been ordered counted by the Supreme Court. It would not have been a constitutional crisis. The court would have adjudicated the Electoral Count Act. That's what would have happened. But let's just move on. And there's just got 1/6 committee is a kangaroo court. Liz shouldn't have joined it, but let's move on. Ron DeSantis bluntly puts what most Republicans think on the table. That's it. I also want you to hear Randy Weingarten, who actually represents the left better than anybody else. Now, what's interesting is Mitch and Ron are everywhere this morning and last night on left-wing cable. Nobody on left-wing cable has replayed what Randy Weingarten said on Morning Joe, of all places. So 15 people heard it. That might be why. Cut number 6.
Well, the argument is that let me just say this. I am in favor of an off-ramp on masks.
Right.
The real issue becomes...
Stop. Who cares? Randy Weingarten doesn't represent anybody. Zero. She's been elected to nothing in the public space. She runs a teachers union. We do not care what Randy Weingarten thinks about anything. Let's go back and play cut number 6.
The argument is that let me just say this. I am in favor of an off-ramp on masks.
Right.
The real issue becomes, is the spread low enough so that there's no dissemination or transmission in schools?
I'm for kids. This is so stupid. This is the dumbest thing I've heard said. What is an off-ramp for masks? What is an off-ramp for masks? Number one, I'm in favor of a hard and fast end date where all masks come off of children in every school. That's not an off-ramp, that's an end date. And that's what the people of Virginia are going to get on March 7th. It's done. And the state legislature is backing up Glenn Youngkin in his first big win. End dates for everyone all at once because they don't do any good. But number two, stop using euphemisms and stop talking about the spread. Masks don't do anything to stop the spread. Nothing. And the science is clear. So people are talking about masks are really talking about control and their power. Randy Weingarten is on MSNBC because she's trying to keep her declining, dying union out of the red wave that is crashing. down on school districts, and superintendents are going to get fired like they did in Colorado because they've been dumb. They did not listen to the parents. They listened to the unions, and they are going to get beat. Every school board member who bowed the knee to the union is going to get beat. Superintendents are going to be out there on the resumes more than Democrats in Congress and state legislative Democrats. They're all going to be looking for the same jobs because they're hanging on to masks, because people like Randy Weingarten keep telling them we got it under control. When she gets up in the morning and does Morning Joe and does not represent them well, oh my gosh, teachers unions. God love you, teachers. Be with God as you go into the classroom this morning. Do the great work that you do every day. Get out of the union. They're killing your profession, killing it dead. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Stay tuned.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
When you had the president in Atlanta saying to the crowd there that, you know, he didn't march in the shoes of the students that are marching today, but that he marched in the civil rights movement, and he remembers the first time he got arrested, when he never marched in any civil rights movement and has never been arrested.
I mean, can we even believe this? That he routinely says things that everyone knows are made up. Nobody calls him on it. Look, this is why you do your program, I do my program. We need to do our best to get the truth out, and we have to be clear. The president, he's plumb loco. I don't know what is going on. I guess I would say this: I'll bet that within his administration there is very nasty fighting because they see what we see. I'm sure Kamala Harris despises the Biden gang, and the Biden gang despises her. They have to keep that quiet, but it's really something that I think they're going to consume their own.
The Democratic Party knows that they're in trouble. When you say that their staff sees what's going on and we all see it, we got to remember one other thing. Vladimir Putin, Premier Xi, the leader of North Korea, the leader of Iran, these people all see it too. And there is a message being sent globally that America is a laughingstock right now, that the bowl of mashed potatoes that serves as the president in the White House right now is nothing more than a suit.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
You let that happen for 10 weeks of your children being kept in a box in the library, excluded, put on display, and so on and so forth for that long. I kind of feel like, and I can tell you're a very caring mom, which is why you're bringing this public, but I kind of feel like that would happen for 2 hours, and I would be down there at that school and pulling my kid out, much less 2 to 10 weeks. Did they really endure that for that long?
They really did that for that long, and I really appreciate that question, and I've gotten that question a lot, and how we looked at it as a family is we could pull them and just go about our lives, and they'll just do this to someone else, or we could stay and fight and hold our ground. And my kids didn't want to leave that school. They've been in that school, my son, since first grade to 8th grade. They had their friends there. We still had hope that the trusted adults would do the right thing, and we eventually have pulled them to homeschool. But during those weeks, we were fighting. We have hundreds of emails to the administration, the Dallas ISD school board. We went down, and I brought 30 or 40 grandmas and grandpas and other parents from other schools down to fight and speak on our behalf. Parents even scheduled protests, 3 protests outside the school. So we were fighting, but I think at this point in our country, the war has come into the family, And our kids can no longer be shielded from it. They need to be guided through it, which we did as a family, to build a backbone and learn how to stand up and fight, because this is their next generation. So instead of shielding them from it, we help them move through it with grace, integrity, and dignity, and they came out stronger.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with a clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with two senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet with 3 years to go is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Look at you! Ow! Hey! I wasn't ready for that.
And there goes Peter Dinklage beating the crap out of Will Ferrell for calling him an angry elf. I mean, listen, he's certainly not an elf, but he's an angry guy. You know, I hate to put everything in a political perspective here, but isn't it true? And I assume Peter Dinklage is no conservative. He's woke. He wants to cancel Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Why do they always want to cancel everything? You know, they want to cancel everything. What do conservatives believe in? We are for things. Biden's always saying, why are Republicans not for anything? Yes, we're for everything. We're for people. We're for people's right to make decisions about their health. We're for movies. We're for different views on the airwaves. We're not for people being canceled or movies being canceled or things being canceled. We're for things. And your side, Biden, is against everything. You're against Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, I mean, Disney obviously taking it seriously because they're redoing the whole movie, I guess. Seriously, what do you portray them as children? Should child actors play the Seven Dwarfs? You're going to get little Billy or Susie, who's about 9? The Seven Dwarfs in Snow White aren't children. Grumpy isn't a kid. I mean, in fact, that would be a great, if they're casting people, maybe Peter Dinklage can play Grumpy. Because he'd fit right in.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
So I think in their strategy meeting, they said, okay, people say that Joe Biden's mental decline is impacting his ability to govern. Let's shoot Joe up with whatever sort of kind of adrenaline that is necessary and deploy him out there. I think the point was to try to show that Joe Biden was going to go over the top long, to try to win kudos and praise from the establishment media. This is his first press conference I think he's done in quite some time. Some people said it was his first ever press conference as president. Second? Okay. That was his second press conference. Trump used to do these almost daily. He did them for fun. And I will say, for reasons that we can speculate, the media was pretty critical. They were direct, precise. Now, nowhere even in the ecosystem, nowhere even in the atmosphere of questions towards Donald Trump. And I agree with my friend Tucker Carlson. The press conference was totally weird. It was a strange deal.
Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live from the West Coast this morning, joined by Fox News' own Dana Perino. She is the author, if you have not already read it, of maybe one of the most important books for young women in America. Everything Will Be Okay, Life Lessons for Young Women. She's also Percy's mom. America has a new dog. It's Percy. You see Percy on America's Newsroom every morning with Dana. Dana Perino, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hugh, thank you so much. And, well, you are a crowd favorite here. I will tell you, I just got off the phone with Bill Hemmer, my co-host on America's Newsroom, and he said that the Bengals have to win. He told me, make sure you tell Hugh the Bengals have to win.
Bill is a Miami guy, and I know his heart is in Southern Ohio. You tell Bill when you see him this morning, Cincinnati's not really in Ohio. It's a Kentucky franchise, but that's okay. We'll forgive him. They're not the Browns. That's all you got to tell me. I knew he'd get his knife in. Dana, I have a very serious question. I know you are like former President Bush and many other people, for example, Attorney General Ed Meese, have never said a negative word about their successors. And so I'm going to play you a couple of Jen Psaki clips. And I don't expect you to say anything negative about your successor at the White House podium, but I want to talk about what your guardrails were. Here she is yesterday talking about red states allowing parents to decide whether to mask kids or not. Cut number 11.
Where we have great concern if a kid or a parent chooses to wear a mask, or a school district decides they should keep mask guidance in place, and there are leaders who are preventing them from doing that. That is the place in some other states. But our hope is that states, leaders will look at the science and data about what's going on. They'll make decisions about local school districts. Local school districts have always made these decisions. That remains the case.
Now, that is not true. Local school districts have not always made these decisions in situations like this. But do you consider that to be responsive, Dana? Is that how you would have answered the question?
Well, no, because the policy would have been different, right?
Yeah.
So I think that one of the things when you talk about analyzing successors, I always keep in mind, the policy decisions that President Biden himself have really made things very difficult for her. And sometimes it doesn't even make sense, because there is no data that shows that masking kids in schools has been helpful. They cannot point to a single bit of CDC data on that. And we also know, of course, that Jen Psaki, sometimes she will say something that will then be proven not to be true like 2 days later. For example, the Randy Weingarten of the Teachers Union communicating directly with the CDC to try to get them to do what she wanted. And it worked.
And it worked.
And now you have Randy Weingarten asking the CDC to help her get mask guidance taken off. I mean, I think that oftentimes the press secretary is kind of at the whims of the president. That's why I don't think it would have ever happened to me, because the policy seemed to make sense to me. Maybe the policy makes sense to her and she's trying to do her best to try to present that, but I often think that the president and Ron Klain, the chief of staff in particular, always put her in a really tough position.
So this goes to the job. Tony Snow was a friend of mine, except when he tried to steal Dwayne back when he started his radio show. But I've known Tony forever, and I've done a lot of press secretaries. I think they have faithfully tried to understand the opposite point of view, and if not to give it a persuasive representation from the podium, not to distort it. Was that your approach?
Absolutely. Well, a couple of things. One, I always made sure that, and I believe this in my heart, I believe this to this day, that I was not the spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. There was a spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. I was the press secretary for all of the United States of America. And I keep that very much in mind, because the reporters will try to ask you so many political questions. And of course you have to stand up for the president and the party, but you have to do it on the merits while also being understanding. I always used to try to do something, Hugh, which is absolutely not just pay lip service to understanding the other's point of view, but to actually understand it, and then do a better job of arguing and persuading the point that I wanted to make, to try to advance the conversation that way. And that means you just work constantly. One thing I didn't have, though, and I think it would have been a blessing and a curse, there was no Twitter when I was press secretary. It had just started.
You're right.
Huh. And it had just gotten started. And I think I would have been even more informed, but also probably even more angry.
It has changed the Beltway Manhattan media bubble fairly significantly. Now, Dana Perino, let me go to this next point of view about how you can become a news person out of the job. You are a very good news person. Tony Snow became a very good news person because people trust you. Because you did not screw the other side when you were the representative of the United States standing up there. You did not distort. You might not have made their case for him, but you did not distort. That is kind of the reason that people can go from political jobs, like George Stephanopoulos, a good newsman. This is bipartisan. If you did not misrepresent, you will be credited with credibility. Is there any way for Jen Psaki to get back what I think she has given away, which I don't play her audio. I just don't play it. It's just talking points.
Yeah, I don't know what she wants to do long term. She always, I think, has worked in Democratic politics. In fact, she met her husband at the Democratic National Committee, I believe, in 2004. Whereas somebody like Tony Snow or myself, we started in news.
Yep.
And if you were to ask me when I was a kid, what did I want to be when I grew up? I mean, this is my ultimate dream job. I get to be on the newsroom show from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern, but then I return from 5 to 6 to provide some analysis and commentary on the 5. And that would have definitely been my dream job. But thankfully, I took this circuitous route and ended up at the White House to learn a lot about government and leadership, management, and a lot about myself, frankly, during all of those years as well.
Dana, tell me something professionally. I can't do a split shift very often. I'm up at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm on the West Coast, and I go until 6 a.m. I go back to bed, and I get up, and I can sometimes make it over to do Brett's show. But you do a split shift often. People have no idea how hard a split shift is. What do you do in between America's Newsroom and the 5, or when you're doing Fox News Sunday?
Thank you. It's one thing I learned about this schedule, which is a split shift I actually used to do in college when I worked at a Cafe Del Rio, it was called. I was a waitress. And sometimes they wouldn't want you there in the middle of the day because there's no customers there. So you would work the busy brunch shift on a Sunday morning, then maybe come back for the evening dinner shift. And you're right, it's absolutely not easy. I did try to give myself a little bit of time to get used to it. I've learned that any schedule change that you're going to go through in your life takes about 4 months for your body to get used to. I try to be very disciplined and leave the office at around between 11:30 and noon. And when I go home, I end up reading all the news, of course, and getting ready for the 5. But I do try to make time for some exercise and also just life stuff that you got to do. I went to the dentist the other day, get my appointments done, and, of course, get a little Percy time in. So I'm used to it now. It is difficult because the other thing is, Hugh, the rest of the work world happens during the day. So people will say, can you do a conference call at 1 o'clock or something at 2 o'clock? And that makes it hard. I think the hardest thing for me has been learning to say no to some things or to figure out different ways to do it. And, for example, you accommodated me doing this call so early in the morning, which I appreciate.
Well, you did the split shift when you were young. That's a different body. I'm 65. I look at these split shifts and I say, oh, my gosh. I see Britt Hume on with you, and I say to myself, he was on with Tucker last night. I hope Britt's still well and truly asleep. It's just something that's very, very difficult. Now, let me make sure I close with 1.5 minutes on the most important thing Dana Perino has ever done for the country. But number one, you've got to ask Geraldo, if you're on the 5 with him, why won't he wear any Cleveland Browns gear? Because I don't really believe he lives in Cleveland. I don't. Number two, that's a request. Up-talking continues to sweep through American young women. And we've got to stop it, Dana. They won't listen to me. Would you tell people what it is and why they have to stop?
Up-talking is when young women talk like this and their voice goes up at the end of every sentence or phrase, and it's driving me absolutely crazy. Hugh, last weekend on CBS Sunday Morning, they interviewed this woman who is a very professional woman here. She's a historian. She's going to explain to the people, and I could not listen to her because she was up-talking. And it really will hurt your ability to get promoted. I am telling young women everywhere, they don't even realize that they're doing it. If they're told they're doing it, they can stop it immediately. So that's why it's incumbent upon us to keep talking about this.
And to empower your coworkers. If you have an up-talking problem, empower your coworkers to say, up-talk. Because it's not an insult. It's like my pronunciation of names is the worst in broadcast. I have no one below. I can't pronounce the name. I have a congresswoman coming on who I know and love very dearly, and Elvira... what's her last name? Elvira Salazar. There's like a 1 in 5 chance I get that right next hour, Dana. So it's just I'm terrible.
I'll take the other side of that bet.
You don't let your producers talk on the air, do you, Dana?
I would love to. If Dwayne was my producer, in fact, maybe we should try to steal him.
No,
let's
Tony
talk.
tried that.
Let's talk, Dana.
No, hang up immediately. Dana Perino, we love you.
Come see us on Newsroom, please. We'd love
Some
to have
morning
you.
when I'm back in D.C.
Okay.
Bill and Dana make the morning. Dana Perino, America's leading spokesperson for raising young women up and out of up-talking. Go nowhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary. The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference. They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment.
I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it.
Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Operations, you find that they have this concept that loosely translated English means big help with a little bad mouth. And basically what that means is they're willing to allow people they do deals with in Congress, the Biden family, on Capitol Hill, Wall Street. They're willing to allow those individuals to provide some criticism because they recognize that it maintains credibility for those individuals.
Wow.
What they don't want, Dennis, is for them to sort of go to the third rail, which is number one, cut off Chinese access to Western capital markets and restrict the flow of technology, not stolen technology, but technology given to China. They don't want those two elements stopped.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Peloton. All of you people on your Peloton today, the company got the CEO had driven it close to the ground to go out, take a job as a co-founder or still on the board. And they brought in a veteran Silicon Valley guy to sell it. So they're doing very well in the market today. This market update brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com are where you turn for your own residential real estate needs for lending. They will help you buy a house, your first or your fifth. They will help you refinance a house, your one, your two, maybe you have three houses. They will help you refinance a rental property. They'll help you buy a rental property if you're a senior and you want a reverse mortgage to get cash out of your house that's paid for. They'll also provide a great set of recommendations on financial advisors to maintain that nest egg once you get it out of your house so that life is easier on a month-to-month basis, but you still live your heirs and ensigns, you still leave them something. So I would tell you straight up, you need to go to AndrewandTodd.com. The 10-year Treasury is at 1.954% today. It's going to be over 2% by the end of the week. I feel it in my bones. I look at the markets overseas this morning. England is almost up 1%. Germany's up 1.5%. France is up 1.5%. They think peace is breaking out and that Putin told something to Macron that means there won't be an invasion and we won't have an economic meltdown. I mean, it would mean 5 million refugees from Ukraine, too. Europe doesn't need that. So their markets are booming. Our markets will probably boom today. But the interest rates are going to go up unless you get down to business with AndrewandTodd.com. Lock them in now. Lock them in now. Lock them in now. Ronna McDaniel is a great chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, and she has put out a statement last night, townhall.com, and you should be a member of townhall.com. If corporate news media wants to know why Americans don't trust it anymore, they should look no further than the shameful, outrageous, patently false coverage of the resolution adopted by the RNC to censure Representatives Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. Let me be abundantly clear. By the way, I, Hugh Hewitt, would not have voted for this resolution, but you need to hear what Ronna says here. As chairman of the RNC, I have repeatedly condemned the violence that occurred at the Capitol on January 6th and do so again today. On January 26, 2021, the members of the RNC released a statement that read, "These violent scenes we have witnessed do not represent an act of patriotism, but an attack on our country and its founding principles." I tweeted that the violence was shameful, condemned it in the strongest possible terms. The events of the day are deeply personal to me and our team as the FBI found a bomb outside of the RNC headquarters that afternoon. I will never forget what it felt like to know that my staff was in immediate danger. Violence has no place in our political discourse, period, and those who engage in violence on January 6th and committed crime should be held accountable with due process by the appropriate law enforcement authorities and prosecutors. But the awful events of that day do not justify Cheney or Kinzinger enabling a partisan committee whose real purpose seems to be helping Democrats' electoral prospects at the cost of potentially ruining innocent people's lives. From the outset, the committee has lacked the legitimacy of past independent bipartisan efforts investigating events of national importance. For starters, Republican leadership was not allowed to freely appoint a single Republican to the committee. Instead, Cheney and Kinzinger were handpicked by Nancy Pelosi. That's true. The January 6th committee predictably has now vastly exceeded its original purpose, morphed into something else entirely. Investigating Republicans had nothing to do with January 6th for the apparent offense of being Republican. Under the committee's approach, almost anything related to the 2020 election is within the scope of its jurisdiction, to include harassing citizens who were not even in Washington, D.C. that day. Nancy Pelosi's committee, which the New York Times says, quote, is employing techniques more common in criminal cases than in congressional inquiries, has no authority to pursue criminal charges, is not respecting the rights of private citizens, disregarded due process, checks and balances. Last month, the report showed that 90% of the committee's subpoenas have been delivered to people who weren't in the Capitol on January 6th. That is political posturing and not pursuing justice. Even an individual on trial has the right to face a jury of his peers, but those being called in front of the committee are facing a hostile kangaroo court that reached a conclusion long before it even asked a question. This includes individuals like one of the RNC's members who was subpoenaed because weeks before January 6th, she serves as an alternate elector pending the outcome of ongoing lawsuits, an action with clear legal precedents, which Democrats themselves have done in the past. Now she could face costly legal bills even though she was nowhere near the Capitol on January 6th. It goes on. And Ronna McDaniel is right. It's an illegitimate committee. That's why I never talk about it. I talk about January 6th a lot. I never talk about this illegitimate committee of Congress that is completely at odds with the history of Congress and with getting anything done except trying to save Democrats from a red wave. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Stay tuned.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Was Sonia Sotomayor saying to them that there were 100,000 children in hospitals, many of them on ventilators? Eric, I went and looked up the data immediately. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I've posted regularly the death rates of COVID-positive people and heart disease and cancer. There are only 119,000 people hospitalized for COVID in the nation as we sat there that day. So you're saying 100,000 of them were children when the data shows that only 5 children are hospitalized out of every 100,000 hospitalizations. There was maybe 6 kids in the hospital, none of them on ventilators that I could find.
6, 100,000. Who's counting? Hey, we're all about
this is the
we're all
problem.
about grace. We're all about grace,
and
bro.
It's a whole consistent pattern, Eric, that they used to do kind of in the shade. They would make more implications than direct statements. They wouldn't campaign on things that were factually false. The left has lost its rooting, its mooring, anything that's holding it,
how many
tethering it to
people
reality.
do we know in the evangelical church who do not give a damn about this? They absolutely don't seem to understand that when leaders lie, when they do these kinds of things, it hurts people. It usually hurts poor people the most. And we have many in the evangelical church who have absolutely turned a blind eye. Again, this rises to levels unprecedented in American life. I mean, it's one thing to say we have differences. This is a level of political theater, of lying and grandstanding that is so pernicious to the fabric of the republic.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build a superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now.
Welcome back, America. Florida's 27th congressional district is represented by a freshman, but a freshman with a lot of pop. Representative Maria Elvira Salazar rejoins me for the second time on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Good morning, Congresswoman. Great to have you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Thank you for the pop comment.
Well, you do. You have a lot of pop, and you're going to pop a bill on immigration reform, which we need. But before we do that, would you remind people of your background? Because it's only the second time we've added about 20 affiliates since you were back on. Tell them who you are, Congresswoman.
Well, thank you. Sure. I am a first-generation American in love with the American exceptionality. My parents fled Cuba 60 years ago, fleeing something called democratic socialism. And I just won last year. I defeated probably the biggest upset. I was the biggest upset in the country because I was able to keep away from Donna Shalala, just for number 27, when no one really thought that was possible. So I'm very proud of that, and the only reason why I did it is because I want to preserve the American exceptionality. That's it.
I think you won because you worked harder than anybody I saw work that cycle. I honestly don't think anybody worked more than you did. They might have been equal to the number of doors you knocked on. But every time I looked up at my NRCC newsletter, Elvira Salazar was out there on the streets. And, you know, when a network anchor or a news anchor shows up at your door, that's kind of impressive.
Yeah, well, it's true, because I turned the viewers into voters. And my name rec was very high, but nonetheless, I was battling a giant within the Democratic Party. Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, three of them went to campaign on behalf of Donna, and I think that's the American way of doing elections, which I'm very proud that I was able to defeat such bastions of the Democratic Party. Why? Because my people know that socialism is a very bad word. And when you hear it, you run the other way because it means trouble.
It means disaster. Now, Congresswoman Elvira Salazar, let's talk about immigration. Before I do, though, one last political question. Redistricting is underway in Florida. How's your new district? Are you going to stay in the 27th? Where are you going?
Listen, I think I'm going to stay on the 27th. I did the impossible. I won under the lines that we had before. It was a D+6. Now maybe a D+1, or I really don't pay much attention because I know that when you do the right thing and you're serving your constituents and you're serving and you're voting the way your district needs it, then people reward you. And, you know, we're 75% of my district is brown, Latino, Hispanic, any way you want to call it. And we love the American system. We want to continue living the American dream. So I'm sure that they'll reward me. And if they don't, it's okay. Because those are the rules that we need to preserve. The American electoral system is sacred.
You are the American dream, and I'm glad to have you on.
I am the American dream, yes.
Now tell me about the immigration. I am genuinely interested in what you think are like the three key things in the immigration bill you are dropping.
Listen, immigration is a mess. We need to send a message to the Browns, the largest minority in the country, 20% of the population, that we're welcoming them into the GOP. We want to be Americans. We do not want to be socialists. And this is the time to send the invitation letter to that minority that we want them in our party. The problem is that the Dems have promised the Hispanics for 35 years that they're going to do an immigration reform law, and they haven't, because all the Democratic Party does is play political football with my constituents. So now with the GOP, we need to say, hey, look, we can do immigration reform, which is seal the border. Because what's happening at the border, I do not have to explain it to you. The fentanyl. Fentanyl is the number one death of cost among people between 18 and 45. And where is it coming from? From the Mexican cartel. The Mexican government is weak. It cannot control them, and the border is open. What is that? So we have the best technology on earth. The private sector produces the best technology on earth. So why don't we just buy it? We put it. More agents, better tools, better barriers, more levees, infrared cameras, more walkie-talkies, whatever you need to stop the child sex traffickers, to stop the coyotes, the drug trafficking. Someone has to do something, not just talk about it. And in the meantime, then you give dignity, not path to citizenship, dignity to those Browns who are undocumented, who want to be here, do not necessarily want to be Americans, but want to enjoy the fruits of the promised land.
Congressman, let me stop you. I've been talking about regularization of this population for 25 years. I've never, ever thought of it in terms of giving dignity to people. That's the first time I got a little chill. That's exactly what we need to do. Dignity, not voting citizenship.
They don't want to be. They don't want to be Americans. Meaning, some of them may. Let me just give you a stat, so then you will know why I'm saying this. In 1986, a patriot called Ronald Reagan gave 3 million Mexicans the possibility of becoming Americans, right? Path to citizenship, legalization, all that. You know how many people took up that opportunity?
No.
70% did not. 70% did not go through the process of becoming an American. Why? Because they were happy. Because they were living in dignity. They had a visa, whatever that was. They were in the United States. They could go back home, bury their dead, go home for Christmas, come back, raise their American children, buy a home, and then retire whatever they wanted to. So this dichotomy of it's all or nothing. Yeah, it's a path to citizenship. They have to be Americans or nothing. Let's keep them in the shadows. It's a fallacy, and it's a political strategy for the Democrats. So let's take that away from them and then say, no, we, the Republicans, we are also compassionate. The Democrats do not have a monopoly on compassion. We are good too. We're not a bunch of racists. So here, we're going to give you dignity, Pepe, Jose, or Maria. It doesn't matter. They're going to live happily ever after. Why can we do that?
I don't know. In fact, I think I'm listening to a speech that I hope I hear at the 2024 Republican convention. Do you have colleagues who are agreeing with your bill?
Yes, I do, and I have people from New York, from Pennsylvania, from Nevada, from Utah, from Florida. But now the party is going to learn about this bill. I'm a brown girl from the hood. I think I can do it because I know those, as I said, I turned those viewers into voters. I was one of the original founders of Univision, Spanish television, Telemundo. I did that for 35 years, and I know what my viewers want. So this is the time, as I say, to forward this idea to them, and I'm sure that the party, my party, and hopefully the Dems will come to the table and stop playing with 11 million undocumented. That includes, by the way, the Dreamer kids and the DACA and the parents and the TPS and everyone who is here, who is already here, and who has not committed a crime, who has been here for more than 5 years, who is paying taxes. And then, on top of that, let me tell you, you know what the problem we have with the supply chain? You know the problem that we don't have enough workers to go to the fields or to go to the hotels, construction, hospitality, the farming industry. Well, we're going to have a reliable workforce instantly. Because you know very well that if you're picking jalapeno peppers in Southern California or berries in Nevada or tomatoes in Florida, sometimes on Monday morning, hey, where are the people? Oh, there's no one because they're afraid to be deported.
So
we
I've
cannot
got
afford that right now.
We need working people. We need people who will pick up tools and go to work. Now, when the Hewitts arrived here in 1868, James Hewitt went to work in a coal mine, and I'm here behind a microphone, and that's 4 generations. It takes a while for the American dream to unfold. I don't think people need the American dream immediately. I think they're willing to work very hard. My question is, who is going...
Just being here, standing in New York, Nevada, Oregon, South Dakota, is living the American dream.
I agree.
Just standing and being able to earn $1 or $2 or $3 and send that home, that money back home so my family can eat. It's an instant gratification. That's why you have people rushing the border. That's why you have people doing anything they need to do in order to touch California or Nevada or Arizona or Florida.
And we will not have a jobs crisis. We will not lack workers if we increase the number of people legally admitted to the United States. Would your bill do that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a reliable workforce instantly, because what we do is that we give you the dignity visa. If you've been here for more than 5 years, you have not committed a crime, you have been working, you're a good person, and you have been illegal for 5 years or more, then we're going to give you the dignity visa, and you better behave well. And then we're going to seal the border with the best technology that we could find. I'm not sure if you know this, but some of our border agents, they have equipment that belongs to the Vietnam era.
Oh, I do. When Lockheed actually ran a test under Janet Napolitano at DHS, it worked, and so she shut it down. I know that we've got the technology. I still want the wall. But let me ask you a last question, Congresswoman.
It's war. It's barriers. It's levees, all right? Levees. Better border agents. We need to attract military personnel, police, retired police officers. We need to create infrared cameras, autonomous drones. I mean, we're talking about a cadre and an array of technology that I'm not an expert on, but I know it exists.
It exists, so and I'm just for layering it. It's what it's what the White House does. Before you get into the Oval, as you know, you have to go through 5 layers, and that's because we don't want anyone to get into the Oval we don't want there. So, Representative Elvira Salazar, Tom Cotton is the leading voice for sane immigration reform in the United States Senate. Are you working with him?
I have had the initial conversation, and now that the bill is in real time, is out there, I'm going to then say, hey, Senator, I need your help. I need everyone's help because I cannot do this alone. But all I'm saying is that Marxism, socialism is a real threat. And you know how I know it? Because I grew up hearing the horrific stories about it. Venezuela, and to just give you 2 stats. Venezuela, they made fun of the Cubans in 2000. 2000 was like yesterday, okay? And they said, oh, my God, you Cubans are a bunch of exaggerates. You're always seeing ghosts where there are none. We will never be communist or socialist or Marxist. Oh, no, we have oil, the largest reserves of oil in the world. We have a very strong, solid democracy. Today, the average Venezuelan weighs 15 pounds less because of lack of food, and they have oil.
They got lots of oil.
Oh, no. Yeah, well, when communism, Marxism, socialism creeps in, it's like a pit bull. It will never let go.
It's why England ran out of coal, and Venezuela has run out of oil, because of the economics that Congresswoman Elvira Sanchez is telling us about. Representative, keep coming back. You're always an inspiration to Americans out there who are first, second, third generation and those who are waiting to come. Congratulations on this bill. Follow her on Twitter at Rep Maria Salazar. Rep Maria Salazar. Thank you, Congresswoman. Oh, when you're going to talk to Dana Perino and Congresswoman Salazar in the first hour, you'd better have had your relieffactor.com. Because I'm working in the chair. I mean, I'm moving around. I'm getting excited. I'm jumping up and down because, I love people with energy in the morning. That wasn't energy. That was Comet. That was Haley Comet energy. ReliefFactor.com maintains and keeps that energy, allows you to focus into some exercise later in the day. So get out there, take it, get going, move around. Later today, I'm going to be doing some lifting, some new cameras in the studio, etc. And I'm here to tell you, I don't want to do it. I'm going to make Garrett do it all because I don't like to lift anything anymore. But when I lift with a little bit of reliability that won't throw my back out because ReliefFactor.com takes care of the minor aches and pains. The minor aches and pains that come with overhead bin compartments and lifting boxes you don't want to lift. Now, we're out of the holiday season, so a lot of the Christmas tree-induced injuries are passing. But now you're going to get into the spring injuries, which is, I think I'll go climb a mountain I haven't climbed in 3 weeks. Don't do that. Take Relief Factor first for 3 weeks. $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com. Come right back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands,
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Streaming on
how 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
Go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined by Wesbury on Twitter. Brian Wesbury, economist extraordinaire, chief economist for First Trust Portfolio in Chicago. I hope you got the good sense to get out of Chicago, Brian. Did you get out of Chicago?
I am moving to Colorado.
Oh, interesting. Interesting choice. That's not a low-tax state, but it's not a high-tax state.
No, our income tax in Colorado is a little bit lower than Illinois. If you're not in the city of Denver, sales tax is only 2.9. Illinois, it's 10, and so you save a lot of money there. And then property taxes are way lower in Colorado than they are in Illinois.
I hope you'll find time to occasionally teach at Colorado Christian University, where I did for a semester. Great school in the shadow of the Rockies. Have you been there before?
I have not been to that school. I do know the school. I've heard of it. But I have not taught there or even been there.
Well, our old friend Eric Hogue, who used to be a radio guy and is now a brilliant director of development, he's got to introduce you to their president, who's a good man, because, boy, could you teach those kids something. I got two quick stories for you to cover, Brian. Number one, in the Axios this morning, it is reported that male economists are freaking out over a New York Times profile. There was a New York Times profile done about an advocate of modern monetary theory who is a woman. And Larry Summers, who is never going to be confused with Mr. Rogers, did his typical Larry Summers thing and just blasted her as being, clueless. So they're trying to make it into a gender. It's not. It's just about modern monetary theory. What do you make of this controversy? And I know what you make of modern monetary theory, which is a joke, but what do you make of the controversy?
Yeah, I think that's Kelton, I think is her last name. She's one of the founders, wrote a book about it. Modern monetary theory is it's Keynesianism, which John Maynard Keynes came up with on steroids. So, Keynes used to say, hey, if the economy's in trouble, we're going to spend. And now the new modern monetary theory people, the new Keynesians, they're almost Marxists, really. They say, well, Keynes was a piker. We need to spend and print even more money. And so going after this theory has nothing to do with sex.
Stephanie Kelton is her name, but I've read part of this, and I'm not an economist and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn. But if you can't explain to me something, and her explanation and her like-minded modern monetary theorists simply insert the phrase, things have changed since Volcker, because the government has greater control over its... it makes no sense, Brian.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, things have changed since Volcker. And think about it. They've gotten worse. We have inflation now. Our Federal Reserve is massive. It's trying to come in and cut off banks from lending to oil companies. They're using the Federal Reserve to do regulatory things that the Congress or the White House or some elected official should have to face voters about, and now they're using the Fed to do it. So when Volcker was there, the Fed actually tried to control the value of money. Now the Fed is trying to control the entire economy, and they're losing control of the value of money. That's why we have inflation, and it's all because people think the government somehow can create wealth. I think this modern monetary theory, it's not modern. The Romans clipped coins. It's not monetary. You can't just run the printing presses 24 hours a day. And then finally, I just say it's not modern. It's not monetary. It's not a theory.
It's not sexist
none
either.
Of those things.
It's not sexist. It's just dumb. So let me turn to point number two. Bitcoin thieves got caught 5 years later, after stealing $3.6 million in crypto. My theory is that demonstrates why no one in their right mind should be buying crypto. I don't know what you tell your clients, Brian, but I just think if you can't understand it, you can't count on it. If people can break in and take it from your quote electronic wallet, you're in trouble. What do you think of this phenomenon?
Yeah, and all I would say is a lot of our money can be hacked, if you will. Your bank account, your ATM.
Happened to me. I know that. Yep.
Yeah, people can do a lot of things, but Bitcoin, the ones that get me are when you have it and you forget your code, and then you can't. And it's got 18 digits in it, and you get 3 chances, and the third one you're done. And you lose your money. So, but here's the deal about crypto. If you believe that the government is going to let it be our money, okay? So you can only make 21 million Bitcoin. If you divide that into our entire economy, it comes out to like $1 million a Bitcoin. And there are some people who think it's going to replace the dollar.
But Brian, there's Ethereum, there's a new Bitcoin, there's a new crypto every day. Why would anyone think it's crazy? It's an unlimited supply of nothing.
Right. And then go back to what we were just talking about with the Fed. If we had cryptocurrencies as our currency instead of dollars, the Fed could have never done quantitative easing, could have never run these deficits that we did.
So I'm not sure. Are you a fan of it?
No.
Okay,
well,
good.
In the bigger sense, I am, but they'll never let it be our money.
No, ever. And by the way, if anyone can make a non-fungible token or a new crypto, none of them's worth anything. I'm just Hugh Hewitt, and I'm just telling you the truth. Brian Wesbury, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Wesbury. Follow me to hour number 3 of today's Hugh Hewitt Show. This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with a clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with 2 senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, 2 former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
What the Supreme Court has said is you have to have a compelling state interest, and the compelling state interest that the Supreme Court found was the benefits that flow from having a diverse student body, whatever those benefits may be. But you have to have a diverse student body to get these certain benefits, okay? So that justifies this kind of racial alchemy in terms of admissions. Here's the problem. Increasingly at schools, you have, regardless of how supposedly integrated they are, you're getting more and more racial separatism, separate classes, separate dormitories, separate graduations. There's more and more of that going on. And one of the basic reasons for that is because of mismatch, because of the serious mismatch in academic qualifications between Asians, Latinos, blacks, and whites.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You want to know what's even crazier and funnier in a sick way? There's a security guard right there. The shoplifter, the looter, walks right by the security guard who isn't doing anything. He's got a jacket on with the big security on the back of his coat, and he stands there and watches the guy. The guy literally brushes right by the security guard. The security guard, what are they paying the security guard for? Just to stand there? Why don't we just put mannequins up in stores in New York? I may never go back. I swear, I may never go back. New York is turning into a hellhole, and Democrats are watching it. They're letting it happen. I can't wait to get Joe Borelli's take on all of this insanity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you. You gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it again. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
It seems like the Democrats tried their best to eliminate the filibuster, and it failed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thankfully, it did fail. Republicans stood united against that, as we have been from the very beginning, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin also stood with us in preserving the rules and the customs of the Senate. These rules and customs go back more than 200 years, Charlie. They are directly downstream from where our founders created a Senate in the first place, to provide the sober second thought against radical sweeping change to our country. It's pretty amazing that 48 out of 50 Democrats were willing to blow up the filibuster. They were willing to break the rules to change the rules. And Charlie, that would have just been the first step towards redistributing political power in this country. The Democrats' next stop probably would have been to make Washington, D.C. a state, our federal city that is by far the most liberal jurisdiction in America. So the Democrats could get 2 more Democratic senators in perpetuity. The next stop would have been to pack our federal courts, to include the Supreme Court, to stop the courts from overturning any of these unconstitutional actions. This entire effort, Charlie, was not about just altering this or that public policy. It was about forever changing the structure of political power in our country. You sometimes heard the argument that, well, the Democrats shouldn't do this because the shoe was on the other foot. Their entire goal was to make sure, Charlie, that the shoe would never be on the other foot. So it was a critical day in the history of our country and the history of the Senate as an institution. And I'm glad we stopped these radicals. That's why we have to turn them out of power in November.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Morning, glory, America, bonjour, hi, Canada. I am Hugh Hewitt. Good morning to you. The next congressperson from Tennessee, the next new congressperson from Tennessee is Morgan Ortagus. She is my guest this morning. She's running for Congress in Tennessee's new 5th Congressional District. Follow her on Twitter at Morgan Ortagus. go to her website, which I'll have her tell her. Welcome, Morgan. How are you?
I'm great. It is MorganOrtagus.com.
You see, I love it when it's simple. MorganOrtagus.com. Morgan, I always tell people, this is the last time I tell people, my son worked for you once long ago, and so they can factor that in. But I knew you before, after, during, and continue to admire your work on Fox News. I love being on the panel when we do the show with Brett
Baer.
And I love the Nixon seminar, of which you are a key member. But would you give people the brief bio of Morgan Ortagus?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on. So I worked for President Trump and Mike Pompeo at the State Department as their spokesperson in the Trump administration. It was amazing. It was a job of my lifetime. And I have a background in business as well. I work in Tennessee, here in Nashville, but also spent a lot of my life in national security. So I'm in the Navy Reserves, and I've worked overseas at several U.S. embassies in the Middle East, a lot of time in the intelligence community, going after bad guys.
Now, the mayor of Nashville, John Cooper, was one of my friends as an undergrad, so I have followed his brother, Jim Cooper's career quite closely. And I think John is trying to do the best he can in a city that's had a lot of bad luck. But Jim Cooper is complaining that the new district has been redistricted. Did you send him the New York map yet? Did you send him the Illinois map yet?
No, someone probably should listen. I think it's a fantastic district. It encompasses 6 counties, and a lot of people here in Tennessee, I find are just like me, right? They're working moms, they're pro-life moms. They want to raise their kids in a conservative environment with values, in a place where you're accepted for whatever you believe, and not a place where you get canceled because you have conservative values or because you stand up for President Trump.
No, I'm very excited, Morgan, because I'm on in Sparks, Tennessee. I have a station in Sparks, and I assume I get all the people commuting from south of Nashville into Nashville every morning so I can talk to them. Morgan is basically going to be the co-host of this show within the limit of the law and good broadcasting. She can actually just come on whenever she wants. You're going to walk in. You've got President Trump's endorsement, don't you?
I do. Thank you so much for mentioning that. That was something that I think came over, I earned over years of working with him in the trenches. You know, I had the privilege of my lifetime was being his spokesperson at the State Department. And I really got the opportunity, Hugh, to be the face for America First foreign policy, what that means to the world. I went to, I think, over 50 countries with Mike Pompeo. We were international half the month. You know this because James, your son, was working for me. And we really, I think by the end of the administration, our America First foreign policy proved itself, right? We really embodied peace through strength. We got 4 peace deals between Israel and the Arab states, the first in 26 years, killed the world's largest terrorist in Iran, in Soleimani, and we held China accountable, held Russia accountable. It's a scary world out there, Hugh, and I think a lot of it stems from having a weak president.
Yeah, I want to run through those foreign policy crises as well as what you will do for Nashville. A little programming note. When my son was working for Morgan Ortagus, that had the effect of kicking me off of every plane. So I could not travel with my buddy Pompeo or my buddy Ortagus wherever. As a journalist, I went with John Bolton. No, you can't come because your 25-year-old son is on the staff somewhere. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hate these rules. Now, let's go back to Morgan Ortagus and Mike Pompeo.
Well, you raised a good kid.
Yeah, he's a good man. I like him. And just a wonderful, wonderful experience working at your side and at Mike Pompeo's side. Talk to me a little bit about the big 3, the new axis of evil: China, Ukraine, China, Russia, and Iran. They are threatening their neighbors everywhere.
That's absolutely right. And, you know, Iran is not making a ton of news right now, Hugh, because I think Russia and Ukraine are in the headlines, as you just talked about. But it's something that I think everybody in Tennessee should be paying to. There's something called the JCPOA, which everybody knows is the Iran deal. President Obama made that disastrous deal. And by the way, what always drives me nuts about this deal is they say it prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. No, it didn't. It just kicked the can down the road. It kicked the can down the road so that the limits would ease off, so that they ended up creating a nuclear weapon under another president. And President Trump said, well, I'm not going for that. This is not happening under my watch. We pursued a maximum economic pressure campaign against Iran for 4 years. And I actually think that's what led to peace in the Middle East that happened under Trump. Why is that? Because we did something really, really radical in foreign policy under Trump. You know what we did? We rewarded our friends and allies and punished our enemies.
That was a reversion to Reaganism. It was terrific.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And then listen, when you look to China, they have not been held accountable for this pandemic that they unleashed into the world. We started saying early on, Mike Pompeo was one of the first people in February of 2020, one of the first leaders in the world to start calling out and saying, wait a minute, China is not opening itself to investigators. We don't have the original live virus samples. They're just saying it came from a wet market, and everyone's taking their word for it. So he really started sounding the alarm early, and it's unfortunate that more countries didn't join us, because now what do we have? 2.5 years later, China still has not allowed any real independent investigators and scientists to come in and find the true origin of COVID. And I have a sinking suspicion they're trying to make sure that that never happens.
Now, Morgan Ortagus, when you get to the House, and you will win, when is the primary?
August 4th.
Okay, you will win the primary. You will be elected. You will be a congresswoman. When you get there, you're going to have a cross-cutting controversy, because the music industry, a lot of it is in Nashville. The copyright issues between the users of music, like me, and the people who write it, like them, are always being litigated and relitigated in the halls. But Nashville's a difficult district to represent. Well, you will have the intellectual chops to do it. Jim Cooper, when he stops crying about redistricting, will recognize it's a tough district to deal with. How are you preparing to represent the people of Nashville? Because they're going to want you on foreign affairs. They're just going to, Mike McCall's going to say, Morgan, come on, you know everything. But Nashville's going to want you on commerce. How are you going to do this?
Well, listen, one of the things that I think is really important is the most important issue to many people in the district and to many Tennesseans is the fact that Tennessee is now a border state. What do I mean by that? Because, of course, the Biden administration is flying illegal immigrants to Tennessee and other states, and we can turn on any, I was going to say we can turn on any news channel, except that most of the mainstream media aren't covering it. But if you turn on some outlets, you can see almost every day a totally broken border. And you know what drives me nuts about our southern border, Hugh, is this the kind of border that you would see in a failed state, not something that you should see in a world superpower in the United States of America. And so this is it's a foreign policy issue. It's a national security issue. We spend a lot of time going to Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries to help President Trump fix the border. And we have to get back to the policies that worked. Tell me how these Biden policies are humane. Whenever you have, the border being overrun, and whenever you have, children that are there, they always talked about what we were doing with children and the Trump administration. Well, tell me how, all of these children being exposed to COVID and being in inhumane conditions, being exposed to human trafficking. I mean, there's more reasons to stop what's going on at our border today than just allowing illegal immigrants into the country. That's obviously number one and high priority. But the human trafficking, the drugs, and the devastation that you see on people because they're hopeless and they've been told, hey, Biden's letting you in now, how is that humane for any of those people? It's not. It has to be fixed. And then I think, listen, as a mom...
a new mom. You are a mom of a toddler, right?
She is 15 months old. She's I've closed the door so she might come barreling into the room at any moment.
That's fine. That'll make the great radio.
I know. She's done that to me a couple times. No, but listen, as her mom, when I go to the grocery store and you see there's half the things on the shelves that you need, it's double the price. And then I think, what are the single parents or the lower income parents doing in Middle Tennessee, right? They're having to make decisions in between filling up their cart or filling up the gas tank. That shouldn't happen in America, and it's only happening because of the disastrous policies of Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi.
So Morgan Ortagus, I just tweeted out, send her $25 or more today, morganortagus.com. You have a primary, you'll win. You'll have a general, you'll win, but you still need to raise money. How much money do you have to raise?
As much as it takes you, I'm obviously going to be doing that, raising money, but my goal is to meet with every Tennessee voter that I can. I want to shake their hand. I want to have coffee with them. I'm going to just focus on being incredibly hyper-local and the people, the Tennessee moms and dads and grandparents in Tennessee 5 that want just to see America get back to what it used to be under President Trump.
What are the cities in the new 5? Is Sparks in your district?
Sorry?
The new cities.
6 counties. Yeah, we've got 6 counties: Lewis, Marshall, Murray, Williamson, Wilson, and Davidson.
Get in there, get going. I know you'll work harder than any other candidate. Keep coming back. Morgan Ortagus. Go to morganortagus.com. Give her some money. Because we want her not only to win, we want her to win big. We want her to be the national presence that she was for years on the air for Team Trump and Pompeo. Morgan Ortagus, Congresswoman Morgan Ortagus, to you next year this time, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
This really is a Leninist strategy. Lenin's old saying that the capitalists will sell us the rope by which we will hang them is what China's doing. The Soviets couldn't do it for a couple reasons. Number one, they didn't have the money. They didn't have a whole lot of rubles to throw around, and people in the West didn't want them. But number two, there was a lot bigger sense of social cohesion during the Cold War. The notion, if you're a corporate executive during the Cold War, that you would be playing footsies with the Kremlin was outrageous. And yet in the case of China, the human rights situation, the challenge to American national security is every bit as great. I would argue perhaps even greater than it was in the Cold War era. But Wall Street, Silicon Valley, they are all happy to not only do deals with them, but do deals with them that benefit the Chinese military and intelligence state, and they don't seem to particularly care that they do.
Well, there was stigma in helping the Soviets. There's no stigma in helping the Chinese communists.
That's right. And I think that, part of that is there's been this naivete for decades that if we just gave China money, if we gave them access to our technology, they were going to buy our blue jeans, they were going to watch some of our movies, they would become just like us. What's really happened when you look at issues like censorship by big tech in the United States, when you look at some of the other things that are going on, it's not that China's become more like us. We've actually become more like China. And that experiment has to fade away. And the problem is not only were our elites wrong in their prescription of that policy, but that policy made them rich. And they do not want to now give up those relationships with Beijing because it means the money's going to stop flowing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
That's not true. I say everything I feel, America. Welcome back. I'm getting pummeled by the left for a line that left out committee. I said to Chris Christie today, I don't cover the January 6th because my audience will turn it off, and I should have said committee. It's obvious I meant that, both before and after. So I'm getting pummeled by the left, and I don't care. Pummeling is not really pummeling. It's on Twitter, so it doesn't really exist. I want to tell you, though, I've got to tell you, I have to tell you, that Anthony Fauci is still there. Now, nobody in America hates Anthony Fauci unless they're really off their rocker. He's an old guy. The Hugh rule, which is you should not be doing anything over 75 that involves the lives of others. All right, you can do whatever you want when you're 75 if it doesn't involve the lives of others, but that's take the keys away time, because after you're 75, cognitive input is simply not as fluid as it used to be. Dr. Fauci is now not respected or listened to by more than half of Americans, so he should step down, even though he's done yeoman service over many decades and is a fine man. And I salute him, and I salute his American Medals of Freedom. He can't persuade anybody of anything. So when he went on a Zoom call yesterday, and he said this, cut number 9.
Before we start talking about pulling back on them, let's get that dynamic of the virus in the community low enough so that we can feel safe in pulling back on the requirement for children to wear masks.
All right, now that's completely insane. And everybody knows it because everybody feels safe. And if you look around. Now, I am looking at the new story published in the New York Times this morning. Denmark is overflowing with virus cases, but the population is partying. In Denmark, the coronavirus is everywhere. Yet streets, cafes, and shops are full. Tens of thousands have to isolate because they tested positive, but employees are back in the office, and bars and restaurants are no longer required to close at 11 p.m. or to ask for proof of vaccination. On Saturday, thousands flocked to Copenhagen's nightclubs, which reopened last week for the first time in nearly 2 months. Nearly 2 years into the pandemic, in one of the world's most prosperous nations, 5.8 million people live free of COVID restrictions, even though nearly 1% of them tested positive for the coronavirus in a single day last week. But the government declared that as of February 1, it would no longer consider COVID a socially critical disease and dropped all restrictions, including a mask mandate in closed spaces and on public transportation. All right. What does Denmark know that we don't know? Nothing. We know it all, but bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. and Democrats in the states perceive a power up, plus up, if they keep COVID restrictions in place, so they're hanging on to their power. And Dr. Fauci is hanging on to his fame. And President Biden doesn't know what's going on. And they realize that all of this has been a terrible mistake since we got the vaccine widely distributed. And they cannot say they're like the fawns. They were wrong. No, I think you ought to get vaccinated. I think you ought to get a booster. I've said that from the beginning, but you've made your choice. And maybe you're still listening. Kids are not at risk. Teachers can be not at risk if they choose to get vaccinated. If they are some reason medically unable to get a vaccination, they can get a retirement package. Time for masks to come off of kids. Time to get rid of these stupid rules. Time, for the first time in my life, you're going to hear this. Time to be like Denmark. All right, I'm done ever saying that again. Write that down. Hugh said time to be like Denmark once. Let's check AndrewandTodd.com's market report, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com, a great sponsor of the show. I've known Andrew for 20 plus years. I think it's 25 now. Bible study with him for years. I've known Todd for a decade. They did our loans when we moved from west to east. Did the loans of my family when they grew up and bought their own homes. They've done the loans of the team. They've done the loans for you. Everybody in the audience calls them every day at 888-888-1172. They say nice things about me, because if you hate me, you don't call up AndrewandTodd.com. But if you like me, you do, because I'm telling you, you can trust them. What's the last most vulnerable thing in America? Trust. Now, I have the trust of my audience. I have the trust of people who read my columns. And I have the trust that you need to have in a mortgage lender. AndrewandTodd.com will find you the best rate that they can. They'll get it done as quickly as they can. They will not shine you on. If you're not going to make sense to get a reverse mortgage if you're a senior, they're not going to sell you one. But if you call 888-888-1172, they will help you buy a new home, refinance your home, buy an investment property. If you're a veteran, get a 100% no money down loan. If you're a first-time borrower, might be FHA eligible. Whatever you need, AndrewandTodd.com. Go enter the information. I'll be back to you immediately, or call them at 888-888-1172. Coming up, America, you got to listen to this. Captain Bartlett, founder of Bartlett Maritime Corporation, on our submarines, our first line of defense, go nowhere.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Look at you! I wasn't ready for that.
And there goes Peter Dinklage beating the crap out of Will Ferrell for calling him an angry elf. I mean, listen, he's certainly not an elf, but he's an angry guy. You know, I hate to put everything in a political perspective here, but isn't it true? And I assume Peter Dinklage is no conservative. He's woke. He wants to cancel Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Why do they always want to cancel everything? You know, they want to cancel everything. What do conservatives believe in? We are for things. Biden's always saying, "Why are Republicans for not for anything?" Yes, we're for everything. We're for people. We're for people's right to make decisions about their health. We're for movies. We're for different views on the airwaves. We're not for people being canceled or movies being canceled or things being canceled. We're for things. And your side, Biden, is against everything. You're against Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, I mean, Disney obviously taking it seriously because they're redoing the whole movie, I guess. Seriously, do you portray them as children? Should child actors play the Seven Dwarfs? You're going to get little Billy or Susie, who's about 9? The Seven Dwarfs in Snow White aren't children. Grumpy isn't a kid. I mean, in fact, that would be a great, if they're casting people, maybe Peter Dinklage can play Grumpy. Because he'd fit right in.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
So I think in their strategy meeting, they said, okay, people say that Joe Biden's mental decline is impacting his ability to govern. Let's shoot Joe up with whatever sort of kind of adrenaline that is necessary and deploy him out there. I think the point was to try to show that Joe Biden was going to go over the top long, to try to win kudos and praise from the establishment media. This is his first press conference I think he's done in quite some time. Some people said it was his first ever press conference as president. Second? Okay. That was his second press conference. Trump used to do these almost daily. He did them for fun. And I will say, for reasons that we can speculate, the media was pretty critical. They were direct, precise. Now, nowhere even in the ecosystem, nowhere even in the atmosphere of questions towards Donald Trump. And I agree with my friend Tucker Carlson. The press conference was totally weird. It was a strange deal. Joe Biden leaning in. He does this thing where he kind of like hunches over the podium. You notice that, Connor? And he kind of puts both of his arms down and he looks directly at the reporter. And then he whispers. You're exactly right. And he was still calling from a pre-selected list of reporters. And there were multiple blunders that came out of that. But if the point was to try to show the nation, look at, hey, if you have any concerns about how sharp this guy is mentally, I mean, come on. He stood there and talked for 2 hours. I don't think that mission was accomplished.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Operations, you find that they have this concept that loosely translated English means big help with a little bad mouth. And basically what that means is they're willing to allow people they do deals with in Congress, the Biden family, on Capitol Hill, Wall Street. They're willing to allow those individuals to provide some criticism because they recognize that it maintains credibility for those individuals.
Wow.
What they don't want, Dennis, is for them to sort of go to the third rail, which is number one, cut off Chinese access to Western capital markets and restrict the flow of technology, not stolen technology, but technology given to China. They don't want those two elements stopped.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America, and a good morning to Elaine Elfman Minnow in Sacramento. We know is listening now. You're about to get the full-on Ohio, though, Elaine. You're about to get the full-on Ohio. Captain Edward Bartlett is the founder of Bartlett Maritime Corporation. He is a seagoing captain. He's a merchant marine captain. He is a veteran of the United States Navy. He is one of the most respected submarine experts in the United States, and he joins me this morning. Good morning, Captain. How are you?
Great. Good morning, Hugh.
It's great to have you with me. Jerry Hendricks introduced me to Captain because he knows I care about sea power, and the captain gave me a lesson that I will not forget long. If we depend upon submarines, and we do, we are not taking care of business. What is the problem, Captain, that you are trying to solve?
Basically, the problem is we do not have enough shipyard repair capacity to maintain the ships that we have in service today.
And how many submarines do we have, and how many of them do we need to repair regularly?
We've got about 55 submarines in the Navy today, attack submarines. And these submarines have a lifetime of about 35 years each, in that range. And over the course of that 35-year life, they need to spend about twice in that lifetime, they need to spend about 2 years in an overhaul period to be maintained and upgraded, and then some shorter periods in the interim. So about twice during the life of a ship, it needs to go into overhaul.
Now, Captain, a lot of people will find this new, but they think we build a ship, any kind of ship, and that it can sail forever. But they're like good cars, right? Every fine vehicle needs an overhaul. And I believe you told me in my pre-brief, when we take a submarine into dry dock, we often find a lot of stuff we didn't expect to find.
Absolutely. These are very complicated machines, and a lot of the equipment is actually outside the hull, where you can't normally inspect it. You have to put the ship in dry dock, get it on the blocks, and inspect it once it's in dry dock in order to find all the problems. So
now, how long does dry dock take typically?
Well, there are basic two different kinds. There's a short one that's done in interim, could be a 6-month period, and then the longer ones are about 2 years in length.
Have we fallen behind taking care of our submarine fleet?
The General Accountability Office of the federal government documented that from the period 2008 to 2018, we lost more than 10,000 operational days for our submarines because they were either parked waiting to go into maintenance or they were in delayed completion of maintenance. From the same agency from 2015 to 2019 found that 3/4 of our submarine maintenance periods were completed late, with the average late period during that time of 225 days. So close to a year late each time.
So, Captain, again, I'm talking with Captain Edward Bartlett. If we do not fix them on time, we cannot possibly have the deterrent that we need to have at sea. Is that a correct assumption?
That is absolutely correct. For the last more than a decade, we've had an average of about 3.5 submarines on average parked, unable to get underway.
So we need to build capacity to repair them because the existing shipyards cannot speed up. Am I right about that?
You're right. And it's not just me that's saying this. The Congressional Budget Office published a report last year. The General Accountability Office has been very critical. And other agencies or organizations such as the Heritage Foundation have found that America does not have enough dry docks.
Now, everyone who listens to Admiral Stavridis every week here knows that our three frontiers are space, cyber, and under the sea. And we have a lead. And I don't want to be overly pessimistic. We have a lead under the water. How good is the lead, Captain? Because we got to maintain it. We can't rest on it. We can't sleep on it. But how good is it right now?
Our submarines are among the most potent deterrence capability that the United States has. No one can find them. It's universally accepted. And when they can't be found, you don't know if they're there. And when they're there, and they're always there, they pack a lethal punch.
But they've got to be there, and they can only be there if they are repaired and maintained. Now, I called my friend Dave Zavagno. I emailed him last night. Nothing big happens in Ohio, and Dave doesn't know about it. He's the guy that organized the reenactment of the Battle of Lake Erie 200 years after. They got 13 ships of the line and 5,000. He meant to reenact the Battle of Lake Erie, and he threw Dunkirk instead. So Dave is listening. The solution to our dry dock problem is in Lake Erie and in Ohio. And this is a submarine dry dock problem, and Captain Bartlett has figured it out, and the Pentagon kind of likes it, and it's not a threat to any existing shipbuilders. So would you explain the Lorraine-Lordstown project, Captain?
Absolutely. In addition to not having enough facilities, the existing 4 naval shipyards, plus the 2 build shipyards, Newport News in Virginia and the Electric Boat Company Corporation in Groton, Connecticut, they're all having difficulty hiring people. Skilled trades personnel are at a premium along the ocean coast of the United States. Because of the actions to close steel mills, auto plants, and other industrial facilities, including shipyards, in the Great Lakes period over the last decade plus, what we have in this area is, in fact, an abundance of underemployed or unemployed skilled trades capable personnel. So we've got well-qualified people to do these jobs. It's difficult, technically demanding work. We've got the people, so what we want to do is build the shipyards where the people are, because the people don't want to move. They love Ohio. So we intend to build a new shipyard in Lorain, Ohio, 2 dry docks, and a new industrial depot in Lordstown, Ohio, about a 1 million square foot factory to repair the equipment from both submarines and aircraft carriers from all the naval shipyards that are doing overhaul work.
Now, I want to tell the audience what caught my ear was Lordstown. I grew up next to Lordstown. Many of the parents of my high school and grade school friends worked at the great GM plant there. But Lordstown is not producing much right now. They got an electric truck company there that's kind of off on. But they've got a vocational school which ranks among the best in the United States, which GM built, 35, 40 years ago. They could turn out the craftsmen. Is this a threat to existing shipyards? Will it draw their workforce away? Is there any reason for them to be upset about the idea of a Lorain dry dock?
Absolutely no, not. The fact of the matter is, if you look at it on a pie chart, there's a missing piece of the pie, and we're trying to fill that missing piece in. We're not trying to steal anybody else's piece of the pie. We're trying to meet the unmet demand. So we have the people in this region. We're going to train them. We've already developed a workforce development plan. We're working in partnership, actually, with the AFL-CIO to develop that workforce, and we're not looking to take anybody from any other shipyard, and we're not looking to take any of their work. So we're looking to support the industrial base, not threaten the industrial base.
Has Rob Portman, senator from Ohio, weighed in on this yet?
Absolutely. He was a member of the Ohio delegation, which recently sent a letter to the Secretary of the Navy questioning a number of factors associated with submarine maintenance and pointing out that Ohio has the skilled trades personnel that are capable of doing this.
Now, you mentioned AFL-CIO is on board. Is Senator Sherrod Brown on board?
Yes, he was. The delegation letter came from Senator Portman, Senator Brown, Congresswoman Capter, Congressman Tim Ryan, and Congresswoman Chantel Brown. Those. I
want people to know Tim Ryan is running for Senate. He's a friend of mine, and if there is any doubt in your mind about how good this proposal is, if Tim Ryan is endorsing it and he's running for Senate, all 5 of the remaining Ohio Senate candidates from the Republican side should be endorsing this. When did that letter go, Captain?
It went last week.
And any response yet?
We know that the Pentagon is looking into we submitted our last version of a formal proposal January 21st. We're ready for contracting, and we know that the Secretary of the Navy's office is actively reviewing the proposal, as well as DOD, and we also know that the White House is involved in reviewing it as well. And
now, obviously, the audience is going to say exactly what I had to ask. Submarines in the Great Lakes, really? And then you educated me. Was it 12% of the submarines the Americans used in World War II were built in the Great Lakes?
Yes, indeed. The former Manitowoc shipyard in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, built 28 submarines of the 226 that were built during World War II, and they were among the most capable ships in the fleet. So
now, we do not want to build anything more in Wisconsin. We just don't want to do that. We just want to build them in Ohio, Captain. But that was a nice shout out to Wisconsin. Can Lorraine absorb 2 dry docks?
Absolutely. There's plenty. In fact, we have a number of different sites. We haven't selected a final site, and the landowners are looking to put their land to use to do this. But there are a variety of sites to choose from. We'll make that selection with the Navy once we get started, and with the landowners.
What is the timeline from go to getting a submarine repair underway in Lorraine using workers trained in Lordstown?
We're looking at a 6-month planning period, which we hope to start later this month. If that 6-month planning period is completed or is contracted during February, then we'll have the final proposal for a 30-year public-private partnership, which we're working with our partner Goldman Sachs to develop. We'll have a ceremonial groundbreaking in October, and 3 to 4 years after that, depending upon final plans and environmental permitting, which we just had a big meeting with that yesterday. We don't really foresee any real problems. We should have our first ship up here, so like 2026 timeframe.
How many people would this employ?
With direct employment, we're forecasting in Lorraine is about 3,000. Direct employment in Lordstown, about 1,000. But we're going to build both facilities with room for growth, because the strategic forecast of the submarine force is to grow between 15 and 24%. So the maintenance capacity has to be able to grow as well. So we're going to build in that future growth potential in our facilities.
Last question before the break. How do you get the submarines from the Atlantic into Lorraine?
The St. Lawrence Seaway was built during the 50s, and it provides an easy way to do this. Unfortunately, the depth of the seaway is not adequate for a modern submarine, so we're going to use a device that we've got a patent pending on called an ocean-going transit carrier. It's a modification of an existing vessel type called an articulated tug barge, provide a modest lift to the submarines to take them through the St. Lawrence Seaway.
It's not really a problem, is it?
Not a problem at all. Very conventional, proven. It's just routine kind of way of doing business.
And so I'm here to tell you, people, and we're going to come back and talk with Captain Bartlett after the break about the need again. The need. We need our submarines at sea. We cannot have them backed up waiting for maintenance. They have to get maintenance. This is the future defense of the United States, and it all depends upon Ohio and Lorraine and on the Bartlett Maritime Corporation getting moving. So when we come back, Dave Zavagno, keep listening. I'll be right back with Captain Bartlett. Don't forget, our sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show. All those people are going to work at the Bartlett Maritime Submarine Facility in Lorraine and Lordstown. GetReliefFactor.com, because that involves hammers and stuff that I don't actually use. I don't even know if they use hammers on submarine. I'll have to ask the captain that when we come back. I assume that there's a hammer everywhere. But if you're working today, I mean really working, not what I'm doing. I'm working, but I'm not working. You should have ReliefFactor.com to help you get through the day. $19.95 is a 3-month starter supply. Get rid of the minor aches and pains that follow those around who exercise, who age, or who work. And some of us do all three. And so ReliefFactor.com matters a great deal to your well-being. $19.95. It's a loss leader. That's they lose money on every first bag. Why? Because they believe in the efficacy of their product. They believe if you try it for a few weeks, you will say, I can never not have this. And that's the way I've been for, 8 years now. ReliefFactor.com has solved a lot of runners' problems if you've been a runner your entire life and you're up at 65. And if you're before 50, start taking it now and you'll feel better in the next 15 years. Come right back. Captain Bartlett continues with me. This is important, and I need the members of Congress and the Ohio Senate candidates to listen very carefully. You got to get behind this right now, and the rest of the country needs to applaud too. Stand by. This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with two senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet with 3 years to go is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you!
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around?
I can't do it again. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families through an unlikely alliance between the Chinese government and a British footballer. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. With unprecedented access across the country, this is a unique insight into the lives of the 90s orphans now driving the 21st century's fastest growing economy.
This story needs to be told across the world. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I hope you have been listening to the last segment with Captain Edward Bartlett, the founder of Bartlett Maritime Corporation, because the success of his plan will in great degree drive the readiness of our submarine fleet, which is so crucial for the next 50 years. Captain, can you go back and explain to me the problems with the Boise and the Helena?
I'm sorry?
Talk to me about the Helena and the Boise, those submarines.
Absolutely. The USS Helena, which actually, when I left active duty in the Navy and went to work at Electric Boat, was the first ship I actually worked on during its construction. It took 2.5 years to build from keeling to delivery. It went into the shipyard for what was planned to be a 6-month availability, just an interim check to make sure everything was good out in the ballast tanks and correct any minor problems that might be found. It took 5 years to complete that planned 6-month maintenance. It just came out last October. The USS Boise, another submarine, was active, was due for overhaul in 2013. No shipyard was available to do the overhaul. And then in 2016, its certification to dive expired. Ever since USS Thresher went down in 1963, we've been very rigorous about not allowing submarines to operate that don't meet their submarine safety requirements, which includes timing on the dive certification. So the Boise sat at the pier waiting to go into the shipyard. The spot it was supposed to take was the one that was being occupied by the Helena. So as the Helena was in interminable delay in getting its 6-month overhaul done for 5 years, the Boise sat for 4 years waiting to go into overhaul, completely inoperable. And
now
final point, the Boise is going to end up, a 35-year submarine is going to end up spending more than 10 years out of the rotation after it completes its overhaul that it now is in.
This is not acceptable if you concern yourself with the national security of the United States. So the question becomes, how do we fix it? It means more shipyard capacity. I love the Lorraine-Lordstown project that Bartlett Maritime Corporation has come up with because of the financing. Will you explain the financing to the audience, Captain?
Absolutely. One of the two criteria that we set for this was that if we came up with a plan, it had to be actionable immediately and not require legislation, and it had to be affordable within the Navy's constrained budget, which is constrained these days, and challenged because we're building the Columbia-class submarine. So we elected to use a public-private partnership. State of Ohio has an industrial revenue bond program, which allows a company to go to the capital markets and raise capital to build facilities and then pay back the bonds over a 30-year period from the revenue generated by the facilities, which also create economic development and new jobs. So that can create the money. On the other side of the program, the federal government, as a result of the BRAC legislation passed in 1989, has the authority to lease purchase a property, a facility, for up to 32 years. So that ends up being 30 years by default. So we've engaged with Goldman Sachs to help us craft this public-private partnership. And the benefit of this is that the Navy can do this immediately. No legislation is required and at either the state or the federal level. And the financing is such that they can afford to do it within their currently constrained budget. In fact, if the Navy desires, they don't need to make any payments on the capital for several years until the facilities are in service.
Now, let me underscore something. He's not making this up. My friend Dick Hauser, who's on a golf tee somewhere in Florida right now, chaired the Pennsylvania Avenue Redevelopment Corporation. And maybe you need a +2 handicap on your team, Captain. That would be Hauser. Yes, he's a +2 golfer. But he did get the Pennsylvania Avenue redeveloped because of the Pennsylvania Avenue Redevelopment Corporation. And buildings built 30 years ago under this program are now being given back to GSA and leased by GSA, and they're going to make money for the government forever. That's why it works. The second name, Dave Zavagno, the Cleveland guy, you need all of Ohio to be behind you on this. How does it feel? Do they buy in?
I will tell you that there's been, and since this has gone public about 2 weeks ago, there's been a sense of emotional relief in the area that people that felt like they'd been left behind now feel a sense of hope. There's been a great outpouring of support locally, a lot of local press coverage, and we've got a whole host of people already ready to go to work for us, even as we're just still in the planning stages.
Now, does anybody object to building this in Ohio? I mean, normally there are competitions for, but we don't have any proposals for new shipyards. This is not like you're competing against 8 other people who have new shipyards ready to go.
I think we have the only plan that's immediately actionable and can be afforded within the Navy's current budget constraints. Those are the key factors that we set out to achieve. So we don't think there's any other alternatives. The Navy's evaluating it. There's always a discussion in a large bureaucracy like this, but there have been no negatives pointed out to us with regard to the feasibility of doing this. This is clearly feasible. It's clearly within the regulations and the law that exists today, and it's just a question of, do you want to do it?
And I hope, don't go anywhere. I'm going to talk with Captain Bartlett after the show, which we'll put up in the extended interview at the interview with Hugh Hewitt later today. But listen to me, America, I'm very sincere. We have to get our submarines built. We have to get them to sea. We have to keep them maintained, and we do not have the capacity. This is a critical national security infrastructure gap, and we'll talk more about it after the break. Listen to the rest of the longer interview on the interview with Hugh Hewitt later today. Thank you, Adam and Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. I'll be right back tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back to the interview with Hugh Hewitt. Captain Edwin Bartlett is my guest. Edward Bartlett is my guest. Captain Bartlett is behind Bartlett Maritime. And if you've just been listening to the first two segments on the radio, you know he has put himself to work to solve a strategic problem